Welcome back to the Georgia First Show. Today we're talking about a very controversial subject, but one that more and more professionals all across America in different fields are beginning to question for themselves. And so we're going to simply present you with some of the information today. You can make your own decision, and hopefully you'll go online or to the library or somewhere else and do your own research and then draw your own conclusions. We're talking about the 9/11 disaster with the Twin Towers that came down, building number 7 that came down, the Pentagon that was under attack, and just a whole host of other things that happened and have happened as a result of it. We've been at war now for 10 years as a result of it, so many things that have had implications to change America because of this. John, let's talk about the security in the towers.
Absolutely critical, because I mentioned that you have to have access in order to wire a building for controlled demolition.
Yeah, and by the way, there were even firemen the day of the towers coming down that said the firemen themselves said it was a controlled demolition, and they know what those things look like.
Major explosions in the basement. They knew it, and they were hurt by it, injured by it. But let's go to access first. There was a company, security company, owned by the Israelis. This would fit with Alan Sabrowski's statement. Called Stratico. Well, 3 executives in that company, Israeli-owned company, were related to the Bush family. Marvin P. Bush, who was George W. Bush's younger brother, and Wirt D. Walker III, who, if you remember, George W.'s father was Herbert Walker, George Herbert Walker Bush, were executives with Stratico, and they just happened to control security for not just the Trade Center, but every airport where one of these flights took off from, including Amsterdam and Paris, where the shoe bomber and the underwear bomber took off from. That's important, pretty critical. Now,
by the way, it's interesting, the same families keep coming up in all of these disasters in American history.
And George Herbert Walker Bush is partners in the Carlyle Group with Salem bin Laden, who is Osama bin Laden's brother. And Osama bin Laden's name in the CIA was Tim Osman. He was a CIA asset.
I bet that's not something that you heard in the mainstream media when all this was going on.
But going back to Stratico for a minute, very critical to realize that on September 6th, the bomb-sniffing dogs were called off. For no explanation, they were called off. And the 7th and 8th, or 8th and 9th, I believe it was, there were power downs. They called it power downs on both towers, on certain sections of the towers, for what they called upgrading of broadband cable. Now, broadband cable looks very similar to detonation cord. So that would at least provide an explanation for the access to the buildings. But
so I believe if someone says, how could they have gotten in, that at least gives a possibility.
That's how they did it. If we can ever prove it, that's how they did it. Yeah.
And so the towers supposedly came down that day because they were hit by planes with
kerosene.
Yeah, that's what the airline fuel is.
Burns at 600 degrees, and it might even under confinement reach 1,000. Steel doesn't melt till, what, 2,200? But they found pools of molten steel in the basement at 5,500 degrees.
And there's absolutely no way that anything that
can't be done.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the only thing that can do that is either thermite or nanothermite. Nanothermite is military grade. That is not available to the public. And keep in mind that all the debris, all the steel from all of this entire disaster was hauled to 3 different countries, including communist China, where it was turned into a ship.
Yeah, that was one of the most amazing things watching it. You know, we're all waiting for this big investigation on ground zero there to take place, but instead of a regular investigation going on like you would have with any building that burned down, they immediately started hauling everything away.
They destroyed the crime scene. They hauled the debris to communist China. Now, you can't check for nanothermite, you know, in communist China. And also keep in mind that there is enough residue. There was powder that 6 inches deep all over the city of New York, you know, from pulverized concrete and stuff. and they have found nanothermite particles in that. That has been discovered. So we're talking pretty serious information here that would lead to a totally different conclusion.
And these 2,000 engineers and architects that have been responsible for building high-rise buildings all over the planet, they're not just American engineers and architects. They're from all over the world.
And some of them are now dead. You know, Jawinko from Holland, you know, he died in a mysterious auto accident after coming out and stating flatly that this was controlled demolition.
Because they're building these buildings based on science that they've been taught in their physics classes in college and university. It's just a proven scientific fact, at least up until 9/11, that a fire cannot
bring down a steel structure building. Can't do it.
And these men are willing to put their entire careers and reputations on the line to save this.
And Stephen Jones lost his career, you know, by standing up for the truth.
Just amazing. Now, there's some things I know related to one of the judges there in New York.
This is very critical piece of the puzzle, because I look at anomalies and coincidences, and when you come up, you build a case but with circumstantial evidence. You can build a very strong case. Well, let's look at the purchase of the Trade Center complex first. It was sold in July of 2001. The Port Authority, which was public, owned it at one time, and they sold it to an investor named Larry Silverstein. And Larry Silverstein immediately insured it for double indemnity in case of a terrorist attack.
How often does that happen?
What a coincidence. Well, but it gets worse. When the attack occurred, then he immediately sued the insurance companies. He put $15 million down, and he sued them for $7.5 billion. And the judge that decided the case was Michael Mukasey, who just happens to attend the same synagogue
that Silverstein
attends. That's a conflict of interest. That's illegal. But that's what happened. But now Judge Mukasey is also involved in two other decisions that are mind-boggling. During the attack on 9/11, there was an Israeli moving company, we're going back to Israeli again, moving company, that they had vans, loads of explosives that were confiscated near bridges and things, and they had this one building that was near the Trade Center where they were on the roof and they were dancing and celebrating and giving each other high fives while they were watching the attack. They were arrested by the FBI. All of these people and employees of this Israeli moving company. It was Judge Michael Mukasey that released them to go back to Israel. And then we had his imprisonment of Susan Lindauer, very important character, because she was our chief CIA asset with diplomatic relations with Iraq. And she was trying to tell the American public that Iraq was doing everything in their power to keep us from attacking them. They were complying with everything. So what did he do? He arrested her under the new USA Patriot Act, which means no charges, no lawyer, no contact with any family member, and she was in prison for 5 years. Now she's out talking about it, but it was Judge Mukasey who made that decision. Those are anomalies that need to be looked into.
Wow, and certainly anytime you have a certain group of people that are suspected of something, you have people that immediately say, well, you know, you have ulterior motives or whatever. The truth is, I'm not as familiar with some of that as I am with some of the other evidence, but it bears looking into.
Yes. It
certainly does. And, you know, John, I think where we want to close the show today is we just want people to look at the evidence that's out there.
Exactly.
There's plenty of opportunity to make their own decision whether they believe the official story or not. But it all comes down to this. What if what we've been told is a lie? And we only have about 30 seconds.
That's
but
right.
John, wrap it up for us. What if we have been?
What if it's a lie? I mean, just think about that. What if it's a lie? You can't get your sons and daughters back that have died in Afghanistan and Iraq. You go through our mobility's been limited. You're assaulted at the airport. You have loss of privacy, banking, loss of medical privacy. In a surveillance state, we're turning into a police state. The largest government agency ever created, Homeland Security. Michael Chertoff, who owned I call it Rapiscan, that's the full body scanners, profited from this. But I'm just saying, all of this, he was a dual citizen with Israel, incidentally, but all of this we're going through. Why? If this is a lie, we need to know.
And again, folks, no matter who it was that was behind it, if it did not happen the way we're told that it happened on 9/11, how has it impacted America? And can we ever regain and restore the liberties that have been lost since 9/11? And if we've been lied to about that, what else have we been lied to about here in America? I hope you'll think about it for yourself. Again, one of our sponsors here on the Georgia First Show and on Channel 22 is Benchwarmer Sports Grill, located on Eagles Landing, there on Rock Quarry Road off Eagles Landing. I hope you'll go by and eat with them. Good food, great times there for the whole family. It's a family atmosphere in the restaurant there at Benchwarmer Sports Grill. And go watch your favorite ball game while you're eating. I encourage you to do that. Till next week, I'm your host, Ray McBary, reminding you it's not Atlanta, not Washington, but Georgia first.